Exploration. 1. What if your God was too small to ever be found? Close your eyes now. And let me ask you a question that might feel, at first, like a trespass. A thought you weren't supposed to have. What if the God you've been searching for, the one you've been pleading with in those quiet, desperate hours, was never lost at all? What if the problem wasn't that he was hiding, but that your idea of him was simply too small, too confined, too human, too narrow to ever be found in the vast, silent, humming expanse of everything that is? Tonight, let us wander into the study of a man who asked this very question, and in doing so, discovered a divinity so immense, it cost him everything he ever knew. Picture a room. It's the only light burning on a dark, cobbled street in Amsterdam. The year is 1656. Inside, a young man, Baruch Spinoza, grinds lenses for telescopes and microscopes. His hands are steady, his motions precise. He is polishing clarity. And as he works, the dust of glass settles on his workbench like a fine, silent snow. While his mind is polishing something else entirely, he is thinking about God, not the God of his fathers, not the God of the synagogue he can no longer enter, not the God of angry sermons or desperate prayers. He has been cast out, you see, excommunicated. A cherem, they called it, a severing so complete that no one in his community was allowed to speak to him, write to him, or even come within the length of a horse and cart of his presence. Why? For the crime of thinking, for the sin of asking questions that could not be unasked. And so, in the profound silence that followed, a silence most of us would find unbearable, Spinoza began to listen to a different kind of sound. It was the sound of existence itself, the creak of the floorboards as he paced, the whisper of the quill on parchment, the wind outside, which belonged to no one faith, no one nation. And in that listening, he began to form a truth so radical, so beautiful. It feels less like philosophy and more like a homecoming for the soul. He realized that we have been looking for God in the wrong places. We search for a king on a throne, a father in the clouds, a sculptor who shaped the world and then stepped back to watch. We've personified the infinite. We've reduced the eternal to a personality, with likes and dislikes, rules and whims. We've built houses for this God and called them churches and temples. And then we wonder why he feels so distant, so silent, so absent. But what if, Spinoza whispered into the silent candlelight, what if God is not a separate being? What if God is not the cause of the universe, but the universe itself? Not its architect, but its very substance. What if the cosmos, in all its spinning, stellar, life-teeming glory, is not a creation by God, but the living, breathing body of God? Think of it. The tree outside your window is not a thing God made. It is a mode, an expression, a thought in the mind of God. The river that carves the canyon is a vein in the divine body. The star collapsing in a distant nebula, a single brilliant neuron firing in an infinite cosmic brain. This is not a God you can petition. You cannot ask a mountain for a favor. You cannot bargain with the sea. But you can come to know it. You can learn its rhythms. You can stand in awe of its terrifying, majestic, and utterly impartial logic. This is what Spinoza called Deus sive natura, God or nature, one and the same, a single eternal necessary substance, of which everything we see, touch, feel, and are is simply a modification. You, lying here in the dark, listening to the sound of your own breath, you are not a separate soul placed into a mechanical world. You are a temporary, beautiful, intricate pattern within the divine whole. A fleeting thought that God is thinking. Your joy is a flicker of God's own joy. Your sorrow, a shadow of God's own depth. There is no where for this God. There is only here. Here, in every atom, in every pull of gravity, in the space between the stars, and the space between your thoughts. This is the God that was too big for Spinoza's community to see. A God that cannot be owned by a religion, cannot be captured in a creed, cannot be summoned with a prayer. A God that can only be encountered through a slow, patient, loving understanding of the laws that bind all of reality together. And so, the question that lingers in the air as the first candle gutters out is this: what have we been praying to all this time? And what peace might find us if we simply stopped asking to be heard and instead started listening? As that thought settles, like dust motes in a beam of moonlight, a new one begins to form, not from the silence of a study, but from the very fabric of the world it describes. If God is the universe, and the universe is God, then what, I wonder, is the universe? Exploration 2. Is the universe a living, breathing mind that thinks in trees and stones? Let the darkness behind your eyelids become a canvas, not an empty void, but a deep, rich fullness. And on this canvas, paint with me a single towering oak tree. Feel its rough bark beneath your fingertips, the solid, unyielding truth of its trunk. See the intricate lacework of its leaves against a fading twilight sky. Now consider a question that might sound strange at first, but follow the thread of it. Is this tree thinking? Not in words, not with worries or hopes, but is it expressing a thought? Is the universe itself, this vast, intelligent, divine substance, thinking this tree into being? Is the falling of the autumn leaf, the push of the root through the soil, the turning of sunlight into life through photosynthesis? Is this the grammar of a cosmic silent language? This is the second door we open tonight, the door to a world that is not dead matter, but alive with a meaning so profound it needs no words to express it. Spinoza saw the world as having two infinite attributes that we, limited humans, can actually perceive. The first is extension, the world of physical stuff, the tangible reality, the rock, the flesh, the star, the air. It has dimension, it has location. It obeys the strict, beautiful laws of geometry and physics. This is the world science measures. But the second attribute, the second is thought. And this, Spinoza said, is where the veil parts. He proposed that for every single change in the world of extension, for every rock, every human body, every galaxy, there is a corresponding idea in the world of thought, a parallel reality of mind. The oak tree in all its physical grandeur is one side of a coin. The other side is the idea of that oak tree, existing eternally in the infinite intellect of God. Your body, with its beating heart and firing neurons, is one expression. Your mind, your consciousness, is the other. To Spinoza, the universe was not a machine. It was a living, breathing mind, expressing its thoughts as physics. The law of gravity is a relentless, unwavering idea. The genetic code in a seed is a complex, intricate proposition. The orbit of a planet is a perfect, elegant equation written in motion. We are caught in the middle of this. We are bodies, so we experience the push and pull of physical causes. We feel hunger. We break a bone. We are warmed by the sun. But we are also minds. We contain within us a fragment of that infinite intellect. We have the capacity not just to be acted upon, but to form ideas about the world, to understand the causes, to see the connections. Your feeling of awe at the sight of a mountain range is not just a chemical reaction. It is your finite mind brushing against the infinite idea of that mountain, which itself is a thought in the mind of God. This changes everything about how we move through our days. The stranger who cuts you off in traffic is not just a collection of atoms in a metal box. He is a complex, confused idea in the divine mind. Your anger toward him is a confused idea in your own mind, a failure to see the vast causal chain that led to that moment. His rushing, his worries, the traffic jam 3 exits back that made him late. When you truly internalize this, the world stops being a collection of random hostile events. It becomes a vast, interlocking tapestry of ideas, playing out in both the physical and mental realms. The storm that cancels your plans is not a punishment. It is a necessary logical expression of nature's rhythm, a powerful thought in the mind of creation itself. Your task, your path to peace, is not to fight these thoughts, but to understand them, to rise above your small, passionate, confused ideas, and strive to see the world and yourself from the perspective of eternity. Subspecie eternitatis, to see as God sees the necessity of it all. So, as you feel the weight of your body on the mattress, the gentle rhythm of your breath, consider this. You are not a ghost in a machine. You are both mind and body, 2 sides of the same divine coin, a single beautiful expression of the universe, momentarily aware of itself. And the goal of life is not to escape this world, but to understand your place within its magnificent, thinking, tangible logic. To let your own small mind rest, at last, within the boundless mind of everything. And if you can rest there, even for a moment, then a final, profound transformation awaits. A transformation of the very thing we hold most dear, our own freedom. Exploration. 3. What becomes of a soul that trades its prayer for a quiet understanding? There is a yearning that lives in the human heart, a deep, persistent current. It is the yearning to be free. We feel it in the claustrophobia of our routines, in the rebellion against authority, in the desire to chart our own course, to be the captains of our own souls. We imagine freedom as the absence of constraint, the ability to do whatever we want, whenever we want. But tonight, in these final quiet moments before sleep, let me offer you a different vision of freedom, one that Spinoza, polishing his lenses in exile, discovered. It's a freedom that doesn't come from breaking chains, but from understanding them. A freedom that feels, at first, like surrender, yet reveals itself as the only true liberation there is. What becomes of a soul that makes this trade, that exchanges the desperate currency of prayer for the steady, quiet wealth of understanding? Spinoza's world is one of absolute necessity. In the infinite substance of God, everything that happens must happen. There are no miracles in the sense of suspending divine laws. There is no cosmic maybe. The leaf falls because the stem weakens and the wind blows. A man acts cruelly because the chain of causes that shaped his nature, his genetics, his upbringing, his fears, made that cruelty, in that moment, a necessary outcome. To our modern ears, this sounds like the bleakest determinism, a prison of cause and effect. Where, then, is there room for freedom? Spinoza's genius was to find it not in action, but in the mind. We are not free, he said, as uncaused prime movers. We are always acted upon by countless external forces, but we are free to the extent that we understand those forces. Think of a baby. It cries when it's hungry. It's a slave to its passions, to its body's needs. It doesn't understand why it feels this way. It only knows the raw, consuming reality of discomfort. This is human bondage, and we live much the same way. Most of our lives, we're buffeted by emotions we don't understand, a surge of rage at a colleague, a pang of jealousy, a wave of anxiety about the future. We think these emotions are choices, but to Spinoza, they are passions. They happen to us because we lack understanding of their causes. We think our rage is about the colleague's remark, when in truth, it's rooted in our own insecurity, a causal chain that stretches back years. We are puppets, jerked by strings we cannot see. But now imagine that baby grows. It learns that the pang in its stomach is called hunger. It learns that it's solved by food. It gains an adequate idea of its condition. The passion, the overwhelming suffering, is transformed. It becomes an understood signal, a problem with a solution. This is the beginning of freedom, what Spinoza called moving from a passive state to an active one. When you feel anger, and instead of being consumed by it, you pause and trace it back. You see it not as a truth about the world, but as a symptom of your own limited understanding, your own history, your own nature. In that moment of understanding, the passion loses its power. You are no longer its slave. You have introduced a cause from within your own mind, the cause of knowledge, into the chain of events. And in that small but real way, you become self-determined. This is the ultimate trade. You trade prayer for a miracle, for the power of your own intellect. You trade the hope that an external God will change the world, for the quiet, steady work of understanding why the world is the way it is, and why you are the way you are. And the soul that makes this trade, what becomes of it? It does not gain the power to walk on water, but it gains something far more precious. It gains an unshakable calm. It meets tragedy not with rage or confusion, but with a sorrowful, deep understanding of reality's fabric. It meets joy not as a fleeting distraction, but as a profound harmony. This soul stops fighting the universe and starts conversing with it. Its freedom is the freedom of a river that discovers it's been flowing to the ocean all along, and in that knowing, every bend, every rapid, becomes part of a necessary and beautiful journey home. So, as sleep gently pulls the world away from you, let go of the need to be free from the world. Feel yourself as a part of it, a necessary part. Every worry, every joy, every memory and hope is a note in a grand, eternal symphony. You don't need to control the music. You only need to understand your part in it. And in that understanding, you'll find a peace no external force can give and none can take away. A peace that comes from knowing, deeply and truly, that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Because in the mind of God, there is nowhere else you could possibly be. Rest now in that necessity. It is the most profound freedom there is. Exploration. 4. What if the most sacred act is to stop asking for things? Close your eyes for a moment and just listen to the silence around you. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of it. The gentle hum of the night, the soft rhythm of your own breath. And in that quiet, let me ask you a question that may feel at first like heresy. What if all the prayers you were ever taught to whisper were a kind of noise? What if the most profound, the most truly sacred act is not to ask, not to petition, not to reach a hand into the darkness hoping for something to grasp it, but to simply stop, to fall silent, to listen. Imagine a man, not so different from you or me, sitting in a small rented room in 17th century Amsterdam. The air is thick with the smell of grinding dust and polishing oil. This is Baruch Spinoza, a lens grinder by trade. His world is one of precise curves, of bringing blurry, distorted images into a single, sharp point of focus. And isn't that what we all seek? A clear point of focus for a blurry soul. His hands, covered in the fine powder of glass and stone, are not raised in prayer. They are engaged in the slow, patient work of creating clarity. And this, I would offer you, is where our story truly begins. Not in a cathedral, but in a workshop, not with a plea, but with a practice. The God of his fathers, the God of most of our upbringings, is a king, a ruler on a distant throne, a listener of petitions. We are taught to approach this God as subjects, as children, with a list of wants and fears. We ask for safety, for success, for relief from pain, for a sign that we are seen, that we are chosen, that we matter. Our entire spiritual life becomes a transaction, our praise and obedience in exchange for his favor and protection. But what happens when the silence from the throne becomes deafening? When the petitions go unanswered? When the pain arrives anyway, and the only thing we feel is the immense, indifferent weight of the stars? For Spinoza, this framework wasn't just broken, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of the very fabric of reality. He saw a universe not ruled by a capricious monarch, but a universe that was God, a single, infinite, necessary substance. Think of it not as a thing, but as the principle of isness. It is the wood of the chair you sit on, the air in your lungs, the ache in your heart, the distant spin of a galaxy. It is the laws of physics and the flight of a thought. Everything that is in God. There is no separate creation and creator. There is only one reality, and we are not subjects in its kingdom. We are temporary, beautiful, intricate modes of its eternal being. We are, as Spinoza said, modes of God. And in this vision, the entire architecture of prayer collapses. Who are you asking, and for what? To ask this God nature for a specific outcome is as absurd as a single wave in the ocean asking the ocean to be wetter. The wave is the ocean. You are not a subject pleading with a king. You are a thought arising in the mind of the universe. Your very existence is the conversation. So what replaces prayer? Not nihilism, not a cold, empty silence, but a profound and active form of attention, a sacred observation. This is the quiet work in the lamplit room. This is the lens grinder's true craft. It is the slow, patient effort to understand the laws that govern your own emotions. Why jealousy burns, why love soothes, why fear contracts the soul. To understand the geometry of a spider's web, the logic of a falling apple, the tidal pull of the moon on your own inner waters. For Spinoza, to understand something, truly understand it, is to understand a thought in the mind of God, and that is the highest form of communion. When you stop asking the universe for special favors, you begin to see it for what it is. You start to see the necessity in all things, the heartbreaking, liberating necessity. The storm is not a punishment. It's a consequence of pressure and wind. The failure of a business is not a curse. It's the natural outcome of decisions, forces, and change. Your grief is not a random affliction. It is the shadow cast by a love that was real. This understanding does not erase pain, but it removes its personal sting. It wasn't sent to you. It simply is. And in that there is a strange and formidable peace. The man who stops asking for things is the man who is finally free to receive what has always been there. The coolness of the water glass on your lips, the intricate frost on the window pane, the steady, reliable beat of your own heart. A heart that is itself, a tiny rhythm within the eternal heartbeat of all that exists. Your sacred duty is not to beg, but to see, to know, to understand. Your worship is your curiosity. Your devotion is your clarity. And in the quiet of this night, as the world sleeps, you can practice this most sacred of acts. Don't ask for sleep. Don't plead for calm. Just listen to the hum of existence, of which you are an inseparable part. And in that listening, you may find that the peace you were searching for was never something to be given, but something to be recognized. Here, in the holy silence of your own being. And as that thought settles, not as a conclusion, but as a soft echo in the chambers of the mind, let us turn our gaze from the internal silence to the external world. For this understanding did not come without a cost. What is the price one pays for seeing the divine in the ordinary and the necessary in the painful? What happens when your truth places you outside the walls of everything you have ever known? Exploration 5. Can a man be excommunicated from a universe that is his own body? There is a particular kind of silence that is louder than any noise. It's not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a door closing permanently. It's the sound of a community holding its breath and then exhaling you. Picture, if you will, the interior of the Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam. The candles are lit, their flames flickering against the faces of a community that had once been Spinoza's entire world. He stands before them, a young man of 23. The chant of the cherem, the excommunication, echoes cold and formal. A curse. Cursed be he by day, and cursed be he by night. Cursed be he when he lies down, and cursed be he when he rises up. He is cut off, unclean, a spiritual leper. No one is to speak with him, trade with him, or even walk within a few yards of his presence. This is the ultimate social weapon. It says, your thoughts are a contagion. Your existence is an error. You are no longer one of us. For most, this would be a fate worse than death, a kind of psychic annihilation. But here's the question Spinoza's life forces us to confront. Can a man truly be cast out from the universe? When his philosophy insists that the universe is his own skin and bone, his own flesh and blood, his own very body? The community believed they were exiling him from God's presence. But what if God's presence was the very air he breathed, the stone of the street he walked on, the lens he polished with quiet patience? They could banish him from their congregation, but they could never banish him from the congregation of oak trees and morning dew. They could forbid him from their rituals, but not from the sacred ritual of a sunrise. They cast him out of a house made of wood and stone. Little realizing he had discovered his home was the entire cosmos. This is the profound and deeply lonely inversion at the heart of his story. The world saw a man being shunned, isolated, pushed to the frigid edge of human society. But what if, from his perspective, he wasn't being pushed out, but let in? What if the locking of that synagogue door was the very act that unlocked the gate to an infinitely larger garden? His solitude wasn't emptiness. It was spaciousness. the necessary quiet to hear a different kind of scripture, one written in the language of mathematics and geometry, in the structure of a snowflake, and the orbit of a planet. He moved to a small village outside the city, continuing his work as a lens grinder. And once again, his hands become our guide. They weren't folded in prayer inside a temple, but they were never idle. Those hands ground lenses that brought distant things into focus. They held a quill and wrote words that did the same for the human condition. His life became a testament to a new kind of belonging. His community now included correspondents across Europe, philosophers, scientists, and simple townsfolk who knew him not as a heretic, but as a gentle, kind-eyed man with a quiet laugh. Think of your own life, the times you felt outside the circle, the moments when a group, a company, or even your own family made you feel like you didn't belong, when your thoughts were too strange, your questions too uncomfortable, your truth too inconvenient. That ache is real. It is the human animal's deepest fear, exile. But Spinoza's philosophy offers a radical antidote. It says the circle you were excluded from was only a small chalk-drawn ring on the infinite beach of existence. You can never be exiled from the sand, or the sea, or the sky, because you are made of it. The excommunication tried to define him by what he was not. But his life's work was about discovering what he was, a mode of the divine, a temporary beautiful arrangement of stardust and consciousness. They could take away his community, but they could never take away his place in the cosmic whole. His body was the universe experiencing itself as a man walking down a dusty road. His mind, the universe thinking a thought about freedom and necessity. So, can a man be excommunicated from a universe that is his own body? The answer his life whispers into the dark is a quiet, resounding no. They can only ever shatter the small porcelain doll of an identity they gave you. And in that breaking, they might give you the one gift you never knew you needed, the terrifying, magnificent freedom of discovering your true, unbounded size. The freedom to find your belonging not in a tribe, but in totality itself. And from that solitude, from that hard-won freedom, a final, gentle mystery begins to bloom. It's a mystery that doesn't shout, but rests in the chest like a warm, understood truth. If we are not separate souls navigating a foreign world, but intimate expressions of the world itself, then what truly is the nature of the love we can feel for this grand, unfolding reality? Exploration. 6. Where does a solitary thought go when it realizes it was never alone? We carry within us, I think, a deep-seated feeling of loneliness, a sense that behind our eyes there's a private theater, and we are the sole audience watching a play no one else can see. Our thoughts feel like our own. Our joys and sorrows feel like personal, secret possessions. We are, in this view, isolated islands of consciousness in a vast, black sea. But what if that's the fundamental illusion? What if the thought you're thinking right now, this very whisper in your mind, is not a solitary spark in the void, but a ripple on the surface of a single, infinite ocean of thought? This was Spinoza's final and most beautiful gift, the amor Dei intellectualis, the intellectual love of God. It sounds complex, maybe like a phrase for dusty textbooks, but let's dissolve it, just as Spinoza dissolved God into the universe, into something you can feel in your bones tonight. We've journeyed together to this point. We've seen that God is not a person, but nature in its entirety. We've seen that we are not separate from this nature, but fleeting patterns within it, like a whirlpool in a river, distinct for a moment, but never not the river itself. Your mind then is not a closed room. It is the universe, thinking. Your body is the universe, feeling. When you have a thought, it's not a creation out of nothing. It's a rearrangement of the world's own logic. When you feel an emotion, it is the cosmos itself, feeling through you. So where does a solitary thought go when it realizes it was never alone? It doesn't go anywhere. It simply wakes up. It realizes its own origin. It sees that the thinker and the thought are made of the same substance as the stars. And in that realization, a new kind of love becomes possible. Not the love of something outside yourself that you lack. Not the love of a king you admire or a parent you appease. This is the love that arises when a part recognizes and adores the whole from which it springs. It's the love a wave might feel for the ocean, if it could understand its own wet, temporary, glorious nature. This is the intellectual love of God. It's a love based not on hope or fear, but on understanding. It's the deep, quiet joy a mathematician feels when finally seeing the elegance of a proof. It's the awe a naturalist feels in an old-growth forest. Not as a tourist, but as a creature who knows intimately that the moss on the log and the blood in his veins are part of the same single breathing system. It is a love that embraces all of it, the birth of a child and the decay of a leaf, the ecstatic success and the heartbreaking loss. Because it sees the unbreakable chain of cause and effect, the sublime and necessary geometry of it all. This love is active. It's the energy of understanding. The more you understand your own emotions, your own body, the people around you, the political systems you live in, the physics of a black hole, the more you are, quite literally, loving God. You are loving the reality of which you are a part. Your curiosity becomes an act of devotion. Your pursuit of knowledge becomes a love affair with the universe. And here lies the most peaceful secret of all. Spinoza proposed that this intellectual love is, in fact, God's own love for himself, through you. Since God is the totality, the only thing God can love is himself, the perfect, necessary system of nature. And you, in your moments of clarity and understanding, are the conduits for that love. When you gaze at the night sky and feel a swell of awe, that is the universe loving its own vastness through your human eyes. When you finally forgive yourself for an old mistake, understanding the causes that led to it, that is the universe loving its own flawed, beautiful learning process through your human heart. The solitary thought, then, doesn't vanish. It expands. It loses its loneliness and finds its kinship. It realizes it was always at home, whispering in the mind of its own source. So tonight, as you drift between thought and dream, do not fear the solitude of your own mind. See it instead as a single bright window in the infinite mansion of a thinking, feeling, loving universe. And the love you feel for this peace, this quiet, this understanding, that love is not yours alone. It is the universe, quietly, tenderly, loving itself back to sleep. Exploration. 7. What kind of freedom waits in a world without masters? Close your eyes now and imagine a chain, not one of iron, cold and heavy against the wrist, but a chain of reason. A sequence of causes, so long and so interwoven that it forms the very fabric of everything you have ever touched, everything you have ever loved, every thought that has ever flickered behind your eyes. We often speak of freedom as the breaking of chains. But what if true freedom is not the shattering of those links, but the quiet, profound understanding of their pattern? What if the ultimate liberation is to see the necessity in all things, and to find within that vast and unchangeable tapestry your own unique and irreplaceable thread? What kind of freedom waits in a world without masters? Picture Spinoza, not as a statue in a town square, but as a man in a small dust-moted room in Rheinsberg. The air smells of ground glass and old paper. He is polishing a lens. And with each circular, patient motion, he is not just clearing a surface for a telescope. He is, in his mind, polishing a lens for the soul. He has been cast out. The Jewish community of Amsterdam, the very vessel of his upbringing, has pronounced a curse upon him, a cherem so severe it forbids anyone from reading his words or speaking his name. He is utterly alone. And in that solitude, a radical thought begins to form. What if the God he was taught to pray to, the God who chooses, who commands, who rewards and punishes like a king on a celestial throne, what if that God was a story, a comforting fiction for a people not yet ready for a grander, more terrifying truth? To be cast out by man is a profound loneliness, but to realize that you can never be cast out by the universe, that is a loneliness of an entirely different order. It is a solitude so vast it begins to feel like communion. His freedom did not come from defiance, but from surrender to a deeper logic. He saw the universe not as a kingdom, but as a single infinite substance. He called it Deus sive natura, God, or nature. Not a ruler, but the ruling principle itself. The laws of physics are not commands handed down. They are the innate grammar of existence. The tree grows not because God wills it to, but because the properties of the tree, the sun, and the soil interact according to a necessary and eternal logic. And you, your thoughts, your desires, the very beating of your heart, are part of that same flawless, unfolding equation. This can feel at first like a cage, to be a prisoner of cause and effect. But Spinoza invites us to see it another way. Imagine you are a character in a novel, and you suddenly become aware that you are in a novel. At first, you might rail against the author, against the plot, the predetermined path. But then, you start to read. You learn the backstory. You understand the motivations. You see how every line of dialogue, every action, emerges perfectly from everything that came before. You realize that your character's essence, its very being, is that story. There is no you outside of it to be free. Your freedom lies in the joyful, willing alignment with the narrative. Your will is not being overridden. Your will is the story, written in the first person. This is the freedom Spinoza offers. It is the freedom from the tyranny of what if and if only. It is the freedom from the desperate, exhausting need to be the master of a universe that was never designed to be mastered. The man who is a slave to his passions, to his sudden angers, his clinging desires, his bottomless fears, believes he is free because he does what he wants. But Spinoza would say he is the least free of all, for he is buffeted by causes outside of his understanding, a leaf in a storm of his own confused making. The free man, the Spinozistic sage, is the one who understands the storm. He feels the same winds, the same rain, but he sees his place in the weather system. He knows why the winds blow. And in that knowing, he is no longer a leaf to be tossed. He becomes a conscious part of the atmosphere itself. His actions are not reactions, but expressions of the whole. This is not a freedom of doing whatever you want. It is a freedom of wanting what the universe does. It is the most difficult freedom imaginable, for it asks you to relinquish the illusion of your own tiny throne. But in return, it offers a peace no king has ever known. The peace of being, authentically and completely, a part of the eternal and beautiful whole. A single, understood note in a symphony that could not be otherwise. As that thought settles, as the idea of a freedom found not in breaking chains, but in understanding them, begins to feel less like a paradox and more like a quiet relief, let us turn to a question that naturally follows. A question that stirs in the heart of every soul that has ever looked up at the stars and whispered a request into the dark. Exploration. 8. What is left to worship? When God has no plan for you, we are taught from our earliest moments that the universe is a conversation. We speak through prayer, through ritual, through good deeds, and we listen desperately for an answer. In the rustle of leaves, in the outcome of a gamble, in the recovery of an illness, we search for a sign, a nod, a whispered secret from the manager of the cosmos. Our entire spiritual life is often built on this transaction, our devotion in exchange for his attention. But what happens when you realize the manager's office is empty? When you understand that the universe is not a dialogue, but a magnificent, unbroken monologue, of which you are a part. What is left to worship when God has no plan for you? Spinoza's God does not listen. It does not answer. It has no covenants, no chosen people, no son to send as a message. It keeps no tally of your sins or your virtues. It is not concerned with your promotion, your health, or the outcome of your romantic endeavors. This can feel, at first, like the coldest truth ever conceived. It can feel like being orphaned in a silent, indifferent cosmos. The comfort of a parental God is immense. To be told you are part of a plan is to be handed a map in a trackless wilderness. But Spinoza asks you to consider the weight of that map. It is a map someone else has drawn. Your path is predetermined, your destination chosen. You are a tourist on a pre-booked itinerary, and your only task is to follow the schedule. The silence that follows the dissolution of that God is not a void. It is a space, vast, open, and terrifyingly beautiful. A space for a different kind of relationship. If God is not a person, but the active, generative principle of nature itself, then worship cannot be about asking for things. It becomes about understanding. The highest form of devotion, for Spinoza, is the intellectual love of God, amor Dei intellectualis. Think about that phrase, the love of God. Not fear, not obedience, but love. And an intellectual love, a love that comes from knowing. This is the love an artist feels for the laws of perspective and color that allow her to create. It is the love a physicist feels for the elegant equation that describes a planet's orbit. It is not a love that asks for favors. It is a love that is grateful for the very possibility of the craft. To worship, then, is to study. To look at a spider web glistening with morning dew, and to feel a surge of awe, not at its beauty alone, but at the geometrical necessity that dictated its form. To feel your own heartbeat and to marvel at the biological processes that sustain it. Processes no less divine than the spin of a galaxy. The scripture is no longer a single book. It is the entire natural world, written in the language of mathematics and cause and effect. The chapel is everywhere. This transforms the very texture of your life. The anxiety of not knowing God's plan for you evaporates because there is no plan. There is only your nature, interacting with the nature of everything else. Your purpose is not to decode a secret message, but to fully express your own essence within the grand, unfolding scheme. Your prayer becomes your focused attention. Your ritual becomes your daily engagement with the world, done with as much understanding and virtue as you can muster. The man who understands why he is angry is already closer to peace than the man who simply begs for his anger to be taken away. The former is practicing a form of Spinozistic worship. He is coming to know God. The latter is still treating the universe like a customer service desk. So, what is left to worship? Everything. The crack in the pavement where a weed has stubbornly sprouted. The logic of a snowflake. The intricate dance of your own neurons as you try to grasp this very idea. The silence is not an absence of God, it is God listening to itself. And your worship is the act of joining in that listening. From this state of deep, attentive awareness, from this worship that is not a request, but a recognition, a final, gentle transformation begins to take place. It starts to color the way you move through the world, the way you touch things, the way you regard the face of a stranger. It becomes a different kind of action in the world. Exploration 9. What happens when your love for the world becomes a kind of quiet, endless prayer? We often think of the spiritual life as something that happens in withdrawal, in the monastery, in the quiet church pew, in the closed eyes of meditation. It feels private, a quiet affair between you and the divine. But what if the divine is not far away at all? What if it's the man who cuts you off in traffic? What if it's the lukewarm coffee on your desk, the spreadsheet waiting for you, the dull ache in your lower back? If God is truly dissolved into everything, then your relationship with the world is no longer separate from your relationship with God. There is no retreat, only engagement. So, what happens when your love for the world, not a sentimental or fragile love, but a clear-eyed, understanding love, becomes a kind of quiet, endless prayer? Spinoza's ethics were never meant to be commandments. They are a guide, a way to navigate a universe of which you are an inseparable part. For Spinoza, the goal is simple: to live a life of joy. And joy, in his sense, means increasing your power to act, to think, to exist more fully. This can never happen in isolation. We are social beings. Our greatest joys and sorrows are bound up with other people. The passions that enslave us, hatred, envy, contempt, all come from one deep misunderstanding. We see others as separate from ourselves, as interruptions to our own peace. But if we are all expressions of the same single substance, then the other is not truly other. They are the universe, expressing itself in a form different from your own. To hate another person is, in a cosmic sense, a kind of self-hatred, a confused rebellion against a necessary part of the whole. When you begin to see this, something in you shifts. You realize that the most rational, the most truly self-interested thing you can do is to cultivate understanding and compassion. Not because a God commands it, not because you fear punishment, but because it's the most effective way to increase your own freedom and joy. A society built on understanding works like a well-oiled machine. Its parts move with less friction and more power. Helping another isn't a sacrifice. It's a way of helping the larger system of which you are a part. It's like your right hand feeding your left. There is no loss, only the health of the whole body. This is where Spinoza's philosophy turns into a practical spirituality, a moment-to-moment way of living. Your love for the world becomes this quiet, endless prayer. It's the patience you show to a slow cashier, not as a moral duty, but because you understand. You see the causes behind his slowness, his tiredness, his lack of training, the pressure of his life. It's the calm you keep in traffic, because you see the other driver not as malicious, but as a human caught in the same network of causes and effects that shape you. This love is not a giddy emotion. It's a steady, grounded awareness. The kind of love a gardener has for her garden. She doesn't beg the soil to be fertile. She studies it, learns its nature, gives it what it needs. And in doing so, both she and her garden flourish. Your life becomes that gardening. Every interaction is a tending. You tend to your own mind by seeking understanding, by tracing the roots of your sadness and your joy. You tend to others by seeing them as gardens too, each worthy of patience, attention, and care. This is the prayer. It has no words. It is lived. It's the posture you carry as you move through the day. This is the final gift of Spinoza's dissolved God, a universe so sacred that you no longer need to close your eyes to find the divine. You simply need to open them with understanding, and look. And in that looking, you become the universe, gazing back at itself in a state of quiet, endless wonder. Exploration 10. What if the key to your freedom was hidden in the things you cannot change? Close your eyes now and imagine a lock, not a modern polished thing, but an ancient iron lock, heavy and cold to the touch. It guards a door you feel you must open. For most of your life, you may have believed that freedom lies on the other side of that door. Freedom from your worries, your past, the parts of yourself you wish were different. You've been searching for the key, fumbling for it, trying to pick the lock, maybe even thinking about breaking the door down. But what if you've been mistaken? What if the lock isn't a barrier to your freedom, but the very instrument of it? What if the key was never meant to turn the lock, but to help you understand it? This is the quiet, world-shifting question that Baruch Spinoza, sitting in the dim light of his lens-grinding workshop, once posed to a universe that had cast him out. He was a man who knew about locks, excommunicated, shunned, his name reduced to a whisper of heresy, the ultimate thing he could not change, the judgment of his community, the rigid walls of doctrine. And in that exile, he did not find a key to break back in. He found a new way to see the lock itself. He would have you think of a river. You stand on its bank and watch the water flow, relentless, from the high mountains to the open sea. It follows its course. It cannot do otherwise. The stones beneath it, the slope of the land, the pull of the earth, this is its nature. To wish the river would flow uphill, to rage against its current, to call it unfair for following the pull of gravity, that's a special kind of madness, isn't it? A suffering born of misunderstanding. We don't blame the river, we understand it. We see its flow not as a prison, but as its essence. Now, Spinoza asks us to turn that same gentle, understanding gaze upon ourselves and upon the universe itself. Every thought you have, every feeling that rises unbidden in your chest, every event that unfolds in the long ribbon of your life, it's all part of a vast, interconnected flow. Your anger at an insult, your love for a face, your anxiety about a tomorrow that hasn't yet come. These are not invaders in the kingdom of your mind. They are the natural currents of your own nature. as determined and as understandable as the river's path. They are the iron locks. And here is the secret, the key that feels less like a tool and more like a sigh of relief. Freedom is not the absence of this flow. It's not some mythical state of being untouched by cause and effect. No. Freedom is the deep, liberating understanding of the flow. It's the moment you stop trying to push the river and instead begin to see its beauty, its logic, its divine necessity. Think of the last time you were gripped by a sorrow you couldn't shake. What caused your torment? Was it the sorrow itself, or the desperate struggle against it? That inner voice that said, "I shouldn't feel this way. I have to escape this." That fight, that war against the unchangeable current of your own emotion. That's the real prison. Spinoza invites you to lay down your arms, to look at that sorrow with the same calm curiosity you'd give a storm cloud, to see it not as a failure, but as a natural phenomenon, with causes and a duration that will, in time, pass. This is the great inversion. The lock becomes the key. Your greatest constraints, the facts of your birth, the losses you've endured, the unchangeable chapters of your story, when understood and accepted as part of the divine order of the universe, become the very things that define your place within it. To understand them is to be free from the tyranny of fighting them. It's to trade exhaustion for a quiet, profound peace. The freedom Spinoza offers isn't the freedom to do whatever you want. It's the freedom to want what the universe does, to align your will with the flowing will of nature itself. And in that alignment, there is stillness, a peace deeper than any fleeting victory. The door was never locked. You were just pushing instead of leaning. The night deepens. The fire in the hearth burns down to embers, painting the room in soft shades of orange and black. And that first truth settles quietly between heartbeats. Freedom is not found in breaking chains, but in understanding their metal. And that understanding, it changes how you speak to the world. If you are not a separate soul shouting into a void, but a necessary thought in a vast cosmic mind, then what is prayer? What is a wish? What happens when you realize the universe has been speaking back to you all along, in a language of consequence and connection, not of favor and reply? Exploration 11. Is the universe listening, or is it simply answering a question you haven't learned to ask? There is a silence that exists in the moments after you speak a desperate hope into the dark, a prayer sent heavenward, a wish whispered on a falling star. In that silence, we listen for an answer. We wait for a sign, a nod from the cosmos, a felt presence in the empty air. And when the silence remains unbroken, it can feel like the loneliest truth in the world. The universe, it seems, is not listening. But what if it is? What if the problem is not a deaf universe, but that we are asking the wrong kind of question? A question in a language it was never built to understand. Spinoza, polishing his lenses until they could bring the distant moons of Jupiter into sharp focus, was a man who understood the relationship between a question and an answer. To see the moons, you do not shout at the sky. You refine your instrument of perception. You build a telescope. The God of the philosophers, the priests, the God who sits on a heavenly throne, listening to petitions and dispensing miracles. This was a God Spinoza gently, methodically dissolved. He did not kill God. He set God free. He released this idea from a person-like form and let it expand to fill every crevice of reality. It became synonymous with nature itself. Deus sive natura, God or nature. Not a ruler, but the single, eternal, necessary substance of which everything, every rock, every thought, every galaxy, is a mode, an expression. Now imagine speaking to that God. Imagine praying to the law of gravity. It would be absurd. You do not ask gravity for a favor. You do not beg thermodynamics to make an exception for you. You learn its rules. You understand its nature. You work with it. You ask a different kind of question. Not, please let me fly, but, given the law of gravity, how can I build a wing that will allow me to soar? This is the profound shift. The universe is not a king who listens to petitions. It is a coherent, logical, beautifully structured system that answers to inquiry. It is always speaking. Its voice is the rustle of leaves obeying the wind, the orbit of a planet obeying gravity, the firing of a neuron obeying the laws of biochemistry. Its answer to your prayer for peace is not a magical calming of your stormy mind. It is the neurochemistry of breath, the psychology of acceptance, the philosophy of Spinoza, laid out like a map for you to follow. The answer was always there. The universe was always responding. You just hadn't learned to interpret its native tongue. Think of a time you felt a deep, intuitive knowing. A moment when a solution appeared, not as a logical conclusion, but as a quiet certainty that rose from within. Or the sense of rightness you feel when you understand a complex idea. When the pieces of a puzzle finally click into place. That feeling. That is the feeling of your mind, a finite mode of the infinite, divine intellect, aligning itself with the eternal logic of the whole. It is you, finally hearing the universe's constant, quiet hum of truth. It is not that the universe heard you. It is that you, for a moment, learned to hear it. So, the next time you stand beneath a starlit sky and feel the old human urge to send a wish into the void, stop. Try a different question. Do not ask for an outcome. Ask for understanding. Do not plead for the storm to pass. Inquire into the nature of the storm and the nature of your own fear. The universe is not waiting to grant your wishes. It is waiting for you to become a student of its eternal, magnificent language. In that study, you will find that every answer you ever sought was already written, in the geometry of a snowflake, in the logic of a leaf, in the quiet, determined beat of your own heart, a small, rhythmic expression of the one, eternal, pulsing heart of all that is. And so the room grows darker still. The embers are now just a memory of heat. The idea of a listening universe fades, replaced by a more intimate, more demanding truth. A universe that is known through understanding. But this path of understanding asks something of you. It asks for courage. Courage to lay down the crutch of cosmic intervention. To stand, bare and responsible in the magnificent causal flow of nature. It asks, what becomes of you when you are no longer a character in a story written by a divine author, but the author yourself, discovering the story you are, and have always been, writing? Exploration 12. What becomes of a man when he stops seeking a sign and starts reading the signature? We are, from our earliest days, hunters of signs, a lucky charm, a pattern in the clouds, a dream that feels prophetic, a sudden stroke of good fortune that we take as divine favor. We look for a wink from the cosmos, a signal that we are on the right path, that we are seen, that we are loved by something greater than ourselves. To give this up feels like a desolate prospect. like being set adrift on a vast, silent ocean with no North Star. But what if this hunt is the very thing that keeps us lost? What if, in our frantic search for a flicker of lightning to illuminate our path, we have blinded ourselves to the gentle, constant starlight that has always been there? Spinoza's philosophy is an invitation. Stop being a hunter of signs and become a reader of signatures. A sign is an interruption, a miracle, a break in the natural order meant for you. A signature is different. It is not an interruption, but an inscription. It is the mark of the maker, inherent in the made thing. The laws of physics are God's signature. The logic of a flower blooming is God's signature. The way your mind can comprehend mathematical truth is God's signature, written in the very structure of your thought. Spinoza's God did not write a book of scripture. He is the book of nature. Every law of science, every principle of geometry, every cause and effect is a sentence in that infinite text. So, what becomes of a man who makes this shift? He does not become lonely. He becomes a scholar of the divine. His life is no longer a desperate pilgrimage from one hoped-for sign to the next. It becomes a quiet, devoted study. His daily walk is no longer a trek through a neutral landscape, but a reading of a sacred text. He sees the signature in the way ivy climbs a wall, seeking the sun, a perfect expression of the conatus, the universal striving to persist in being. He feels the signature in the satisfaction of a problem solved, the joy of a deep connection, his finite mind momentarily harmonizing with the infinite intellect of God. He finds the divine not in the ruptures of reality, but in its seamless, magnificent weave. This man is no longer a beggar at the gates of a palace, hoping for a coin. He is a naturalist in the king's own garden, and he has come to understand that the garden, the king, and he himself are all part of one indivisible estate. His worship is not one of petition. It is one of perception. His highest prayer is a lifetime of attentive, grateful observation. Think of the weight that lifts, the anxiety of misinterpretation. Was that a sign or just a coincidence? Vanishes. It is replaced by the calm certainty of the scientist and the reverence of the mystic combined. You are no longer waiting for permission from the sky. You are engaging in a continuous, silent conversation with the logic of the world. You are learning to read. And in this reading, you find a different kind of meaning. A meaning not handed down, but drawn up from the deep well of reality itself. Your struggles are no longer punishments or tests. They are complex chapters in the book of you, demanding to be understood. Your joys are not rewards, but moments of pure alignment, where your nature and the nature of the whole sing the same note. You stop looking for a purpose given to you. You start discerning the purpose that you are, a unique, necessary expression of the universe's own striving to know and to be. The man who reads the signature instead of seeking the sign has traded superstition for a sacred intimacy. He walks in a world that is forever holy, forever speaking his name, not in a whisper from the clouds, but in the rustle of every leaf, the pull of every tide, the silent, steadfast beating of his own inevitable heart. He is home, and he always was. He just hadn't learned to read the address. So let this be the thought that carries you into sleep. Not of a universe that is silent and cold, but of a universe that is a vast, open book, its pages turned by the wind, its wisdom written in the language of everything that is and ever will be. And you, dear listener, are not just reading it. You are a word, a sentence, a beloved and necessary paragraph in its eternal, unfolding story. Rest now within its pages.